Welcome to Influential Entrepreneurs, bringing you interviews with elite business leaders and experts, sharing tips and strategies for elevating your business to the next level. Here's your host, Mike Saunders.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Influential Entrepreneurs. This is Mike Saunders, the Authority Positioning Coach. Today we have with us Jeff Finney, who's the owner and CEO of Ultimate Cabinets and the Thru LLC. Jeff, welcome to the program.
Hey, thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
Hey, so give us a little bit of your background and what your entrepreneurial journey has been like to this point in your career.
Sure. So, I'm from Tulsa, Oklahoma, basically, and we have a cabinet component and cabinet manufacturing company where we build everything from residential cabinets to cabinets that we flat pack and ship around the U.S. and been doing that since 2005. And started
I was going to say, since you were 5, that would have been quite the storied career.
That'd have been pretty great. But no, we started out in 2005 in my garage, and just been growing ever since. And we hit a few rough years there in the recession, obviously being connected to the home industry like we are, and then kind of grew from there. And now we sit up here. To date, we've got about 50 employees and spread across a couple of facilities, and still just moving up.
That's a great testament to just keep plugging away. And when the dip happens, just kind of, fortify yourself and wait, because so many times, no matter what industry you're in, things seem to kind of pull on through and shift. So I think that's really, really awesome. And I know that we want to talk about your book and how to fire yourself. So let's jump into that, because that doesn't sound too good. Like, ooh, I've been fired, or how to fire yourself. That doesn't sound really good. But your book is called "That's It, I'm Fired." So at what point did you think, even before writing the book, because at some point you were like, "That's it, that's enough. I'm running 19 different directions. I need to do something about it." And then probably when you started making some progress in what we'll talk about here, operations and things like that, then it started maybe congealing for you to go, ooh, here's a system, here's a process. I need to now package this up. So what was that process like for you?
Yeah, so several years ago, I hired basically as an executive business coach here in Oklahoma, and started just learning about different ways to grow your business. One of the big things it did was kind of give me some personal accountability. As being the owner and not being accountable to anybody, sometimes it's hard to kind of keep yourself on a roadmap, to where you need to be going. And through this process of learning how to work, on my business rather than just in it, I learned a lot of key details. And kind of what came out of it, before the book, was that I started realizing basically what I'm doing is I'm firing myself from these activities in the business that I don't need to be doing, that ultimately are holding the business up from succeeding. And as you grow in your business, you start realizing as an owner that you've got a responsibility to your business to kind of get out of the way and make it a more stable business by trusting your employees, hiring the right people. It's kind of like being a good steward of your business. So kind of through that process, that's where I kind of coined that term of, that's it, I'm fired, because basically that's what I do. I look at my daily routines in and out, and whenever I start to realize that I'm doing too much of something, I kind of look and see what's holding my business back the most, and that's what I focus on firing myself from.
It kind of gives me the impression, like when you hear the Tony Robbins or the life coaches of the world say, you'll make a change when you're sick and tired of being sick and tired. And it seems like you got to that point where it's like, that's it, that's it, I'm just tired. So when you came to that point and you're like, okay, that's it, what was the first step you took to then start the firing process? Because you had to put yourself on verbal warning and then written warning, all the kind of things that you might think in HR. And I've not read your book, but I would suspect that there's a lot of overlay that way. But what was some of the first steps you actually took to go, okay, I need to start pulling back here and putting this into place? Yeah,
it's probably a little more unorthodox, but basically, it started with me coming up with a vision for our company, like where we wanted to go. And a vision for me was, it was something that was unreachable, something that was so far out in the distance that the company would never really attain that. So think of something like Disney's vision statement of putting a smile on every face. Realistically, they'll never attain that, but if they're always moving towards that, it's their kind of lighthouse. So that vision puts that lighthouse out in the distance where basically you always know which direction you're going. So the great thing a vision does is that it lets you have the answer to those yes/no questions we all face as business owners. In other words, do we need to be doing this contract, or do we need to look for another business to purchase, or do we need to look for more employees? And, if the answer is yes, it's getting us closer to our vision, then you go 100 miles in that direction. But the same is true for the opposite. If the answer is no, then, it's dead in the water and you move on. So it starts with a vision. And then for me, it was me personally as an owner, it went into delegation. So basically I found out the most important thing that I was doing was holding the business back, and figured out a way to delegate that, which for me was, at the time, was working on the shop floor. I was spending way too much time on the shop floor, not enough time in the office, selling, marketing, accounting, doing the other functions of the business. So I started delegating my shop responsibilities off on my employees. And through that process, I realized real quickly that you can't just delegate without procedures. So you have to have SOPs, or standard operating procedures. And we do very simplified procedures in that there are 8 steps. And basically the employees kind of have the flexibility to fill in the gaps. We just kind of give them the beginning, the middle, and the end, to where they can know the main parts of it, but they kind of learn how to do it themselves their way. So we don't have these very elaborate, drawn out procedures. They're just, like I said, 8 steps maximum. And we just kind of break it down with pictures and captions. They're very simple. And that's the main process of firing yourself. So you're actually, and that's what the reason I use the word firing myself is because when I fire myself, I don't want to be able to have the option to come back to that. So we don't want to just delegate and leave it there. We want to have the processes and the structures in place to where when we fire ourselves, we're truly ridding ourselves of that function of the business.
Yeah, have you ever heard that example of burn the boats?
That's right. Yeah, we got no options.
Yep, we got to fight and win because those boats are on fire. So that's really
right.
Good.
There is no plan B.
So once you know where you want to go, and then once you start delegating, and then let your hands off of it and give good process, standard operating procedures. What about some efficiencies? I know in your book you talk about automating. So what are some areas that you can automate? Even like you would think, like in a manufacturing, how do you automate that? Do you have people touching wood or hammering? So how do you automate?
Yeah, so, automation branches into all sorts of things. So when you say automation, at first people think of robots and things like that, and that's not necessarily the kind of automation I'm talking about. Automation would be, automating redundant tasks. Think of, when you're thinking about in the office side of things, think about every time you click the mouse button, essentially that's a waste. So if you can reduce the amount of clicks that somebody takes to get to their the place they're going, that's one thing you can automate. We automate payroll, we automate invoicing, we automate some of our collections, and then out on the shop floor, we automate things like when you're building a certain widget, we build jigs for it and things like that, so you don't have to think about it. You just put it in, put part A in slot A and put part B in slot B, and then nail them together. So it's automation covers a broad spectrum, but the more you can automate, the better, because if you're wasting time on, clicking your mouse, or if you're wasting time on trying to find a certain spreadsheet or whatever, that's just wasted movement that you never get back, that is not creating value for the customer. So when we automate in our business, we always kind of start out the hard way. We start out either on paper or we start out on dry erase board. We run it manually for a certain amount of time, work all the kinks out of it, and then as soon as we work the kinks out of it, usually an automation plan kind of comes to us. We're like, oh yeah, now we're ready to automate this. And for example, right now we're automating our scheduling, and literally we're doing it on dry erase boards with magnetic strips for each job, moving those magnetic strips around every day, and it's very cumbersome. But out of that, we're learning how to work out the kinks, and then we'll automate it to where it's all eventually digital and on computer, and everybody in the company will be able to see it real time.
Yeah, and know exactly what stage of the project it's at, and then you can jump in or make notes. And yeah, that's a good point.
That's right.
Did you find that when you started creating these standard operating procedures and automations, that you needed to bring someone in from the outside to help you see opportunities because you were too close to it yourself?
Not really. To be real honest, we relied on our employees that do it every day to kind of give us those ideas. So, we have what's called a genie program. So basically throughout the shop, scattered around the shop, are these little laminated note cards called genie cards. And basically it's like an employee putting their wish in. So every month we get 20 or 30 genie cards turned into the office, and we tackle those projects one-on-one and with the person that made the card. So essentially we like for them to look at it as like a wish list, like I wish I could have it this way type deal. And that's been monumental in the amount of changes that's been made in our company in the last 6 months, because now we've got 50 employees injected in the process rather than just a handful. So,
yeah.
And not every idea or wish. Yeah, right. And not every idea and every wish gets implemented, but some version of it does, so that way they understand that their voice is important. And then it's like you're relying on the people that are actually doing that function every day, so they should be the ones that know the best.
Well, and I think that's the biggest thing is the people that are doing it day in and day out. And if you said, man, if you could wave a magic wand, if you had that, lamp and you could rub it and here comes the genie, what would you want? What could transform this for you? Oh man, it'd be great if. And then that idea might not be the idea, but it makes you think of a step that leads to the idea. So crowdsourcing your own, rescue, I've heard it said, be an active participant in your own rescue. Well, don't just offload it to somebody, get involved and ask what the team could do. So I think that's a huge aha. So what about when you have then that delegation in place as the owner, if you've got to kind of wean yourself off of kind of checking and rechecking and following up and keeping your fingers in the mix, you got to trust the team that you have in place. But at what point do you realize that things are running to where I can actually, and this might sound counterintuitive to people, I can actually take a vacation and actually leave and not check emails every other second and not make calls in, but I can check out mentally and physically.
Yeah, well, that's the end game right there.
Yeah.
That's the main goal, and for me, that's the part of the process that I'm in. So I kind of look at it as I kind of ask myself, what's the value of my business, and by that I mean, what's the value of my business without me in it? And I've been able to fire myself from enough activities now that I can pull myself kind of out of the business and say, where am I still affecting the biggest part of the business in that it's affecting my value, like because it takes me to do it. If I was not here, this function wouldn't get done. So, that for me right now, that's accounting. So I'm automating a lot of my accounting features and functions because we do it all in-house. And getting that off my plate is going to add the biggest value to my business to where I can really, truly say after that, you could pull me out of the business and it should still function to the high level that it does today.
And that doesn't mean you check out and say, see you next quarter.
That's right. No,
it just means
I still enjoy what I do. Yeah, I still enjoy what I do. I'm still, pretty young. I'm 43 and I still enjoy working. I still enjoy my job. So I'm not doing that to quit working necessarily. I'm just doing it to put my business in a position to where, if I had to sell or if something happened to me, it could still, still have good jobs for my employees and provide for my family. Well, if I wasn't here, there's a lot of reasons to get value into your business beyond just yourself. So, I mean, it's not for me to necessarily retire because I still enjoy what I'm doing, but it allows me to have a clear perspective of where I need to focus my time to make the business more valuable.
Yes. So what do you say to someone that says, okay, I like the sound of this, I need to start doing this? Maybe the first step is just to see where I can create some processes and free up some time and things like that. What about that? That almost feels like that's handling what's happening right now. We're handling the processes. We're handling what's in. But how do you make more come in? So what about putting things into place to bring in more business from the perspective of still with hands off?
So it's kind of, I may have you rephrase that a little bit. So are you saying more from the sales perspective?
Sales and marketing. Yeah. How do you, as the owner, not feel like I'm the only one that can bring it in? I'm the rainmaker. I need to step back and empower sales and marketing and things like that.
That's right. Yeah. So, we started going through that process 3 years ago, because before that, I was the primary salesperson. I was the only marketing person. We are still a little bit weak on marketing, but we have, some inbound stuff that we work on, a little bit of outbound stuff we work on. And we handle that just kind of between a couple of us here in the office. And that's still one of my feature functions that I'll be firing myself from eventually, but it's not a hot spot right now. It's not holding the business up. But from a sales perspective, we got to the point where to grow, we had to hire a salesperson. And now, a few years later, we've actually got 4 salespeople. And beyond that, we've got processes in place for those people, just like we have processes in place for our manufacturing. Things like, one of the big things we push is trying to gain market share right now while things are so busy. Because if we're out looking to gain market share now while things are busy, then when things are slow, we're going to have more market share and we're going to be better through those slow times. Whereas most people are trying to gain market share only when they're slow, right? Because that's the time they have to sell. So we're constantly pushing, trying to make new contacts, trying to bring in new business, better business, maybe even firing a couple of customers that don't fit us as well as they used to, or maybe more time demanding customers that aren't a match. So we have processes in place for continuing sales effort, like every day, day in, day out.
Nice. Excellent. So let's wrap back up with your book. If someone is going to go pick up a copy of that, is this going to be kind of like a 30,000-foot overview theory? Sounds great. Or are they going to be able to roll up their sleeves, dive in and say, this is the blueprint, I can follow this?
Yeah, that's right. So I tried to write it from the perspective of what I actually went through. So I try to write it more of like a short tactical guide, something you could read in a day or two. It's a short book, but it's more of a tactical guide, like do this, and then you should be able to end up here, So it's definitely a very laid out tactical guide where you can, there's a lot of action items. In fact, at the end of each chapter, there's several action items that stem from what I did and that worked for me, and some things that didn't work for me. So I kind of lay out both sides of it in the book. So yeah, it's definitely not a 30,000-foot view. It's more of a boots on the ground. Here's where I can start, and here's how I can make it work.
Excellent. Well, Jeff, it's really great chatting with you. What's the best way someone can reach out and pick up a copy of your book and find out more of what you do in your teachings and your podcast?
Yeah, so the best thing is go to my website. It's the pushthru.com. That's the pushthru.com. We've got a bunch of podcasts up there the podcast is more of a pet project for me. So it's just kind of, I do it sometimes and I don't do it, but there's about 30 episodes up there that has this kind of talk on there. The book is on there, as well as some other things, some articles and resources on the website. So you can make contact directly with me through there. My email's on the website. So just visit pushthru.com.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Jeff. It was a pleasure having you on today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
You've been listening to Influential Entrepreneurs with Mike Saunders. To learn more about the resources mentioned on today's show or listen to past episodes, visit www.influentialentrepreneursradio.com.